Okay, so the next area of the brain that we see commonly affected by prenatal alcohol exposure is memory. And it's really important to note that memory is actually located in a couple different regions of the brain. So this one can be confusing because you can have some individuals with FASD who will sometimes remember and sometimes not, and it'll kind of seem inconsistent, and you'll wonder like, are they just messing with me? Like, do they actually have a memory deficit or not? Because sometimes they remember great, and sometimes they act like I never said it at all. And so what that goes back to is that they can have parts of their memory that are working and parts that aren't because it's a few different brain regions. And so one could be affected while another isn't. Yeah, it's complicated, I know, but I'll try to break it down a little bit. So we break down memory into a couple of different areas. Information input, so choosing what in the environment you put in your brain, the integration of that information, like where do I put it in my brain, forming associations, what have I learned before that connects with that, then the retrieval of it, being able to find it, and then being able to communicate back to you, what they've remembered. So that's a lot of different parts, of memory. And so if someone is struggling with one and not the others, then they can usually get by pretty well, right? If it's information input, if they usually choose the right information to put in their brain, like what you're saying, and so then they would normally remember it and be able to find it and all of that. But sometimes they might choose the wrong thing, and so then they remember something else about that day, but not what you said, right? So it can be confusing, but just, so that you understand that, there's parts that can be affected and parts that will be fine. And so we just have to really try to work with what's working for them. And what it can look like is that they might repeat the same mistake over and over, even if we've, increased a punishment or the consequence has gotten more severe. And so you're wondering, like, okay, like, why isn't this person learning from their mistake? And that really goes back to memory. If they don't make the connection, form an association between the action and the consequence, then those two aren't connected. And so then the next time they go to do it, they think, well, I've done that before, so it's fine. And they're not connecting the consequence to it. And so that would be why they keep making the same mistake. The other part of memory is that often what we can see for individuals with FASD is that they can have inconsistent memory and performance. So some days they're remembering great, they're doing great, and then other days they're not doing so well. It can get very, very confusing. And what that goes back to is where did they store it and can they find it when they need it, right? So if you imagine like a filing cabinet, most of us would have our memory would be nice and neat and organized like a filing cabinet, and we can find what we need simply by going to the place where we know we stored things. But for people with FASD and their memory, it's like you take all of those memories, all of those files, and you spill them out on the floor in a big messy pile. And they just, there's no order, no organization. So how do you find what you need? Sometimes what they need is on top of the pile. So then you're like, oh, great. I taught them, they know, everything's great. But that same memory could then get pushed to the bottom of the pile 2 days later, and then they can't find it, right? And so that can be very frustrating if you're like, okay, well, I know they know this because we talked about it a few days ago, and now they're acting like they don't know it. So we just have to understand that there is a memory deficit. So if that happens, we do have some pretty simple solutions for you. Frequent reminders are always helpful. Lists, again, so lists can be really, really great. If it's written down, then they see it, they know it, they can do it. They don't have to rely on memory. They don't have to rely on, the disorganized brain. They just can look at the paper and go, oh, that's what I need to do, right? And sending them texts or just maintaining consistent contact, making sure that you're checking in and, that you're checking that they know what they need to do next and that they have it all kind of planned out. And always check for understanding. So after you've had a conversation with them, ask them, you know, what does that mean to you? Or what would that look like to you? So that you can see if they have retained what you've told them. All right. Sorry.